Yo, what's going on, guys? Chris Barner here with Overtime Athletes. And for today's video, what I want to go over is I want to show you the 3 strategies or protocols that we use when only training body weight to be able to achieve a very similar stimulus and stress to if I was training an athlete with resistance, with weights, dumbbells, barbells. Right? So as far as our speed, agility, and power, that's all going to be the same. We're still going to be performing jumps, sprinting, cutting, changing directions, all those things. But when it comes to the actual lifting portion, how are we able to mimic or get close to those same results that we use with weights? Now, I have a lot of athletes out there that either they don't have access to weights, either they go on vacation, or they simply, their parents won't let them use weights. So I've had to find ways to be able to overcome that. And these are the 3 best strategies that I've noticed that get us very similar results. So first, in block 1, just like anything else, we're gonna go in a very progressive manner. So everything builds on top of each other, especially when it comes to our off-season training for athletes. First, we're gonna fire off with what we call escalated density training. Now, this is a form of training essentially coined or created by a strength coach named Charles Staley, where essentially what he wanted to do with his clients is be able to create a total amount of work or increase their total amount of work between 2 movements. These 2 movements are usually going to be an agonist and antagonist. So for instance, let's say it's a push-up and an inverted row. And essentially what you're going to do is you're going to go back and forth between those 2 movements for 15 minutes, performing a certain amount of reps that you possibly can. And essentially the goal is to be able to, between those 2 movements, get as many repetitions or total amount of work. So let's go break that down a little bit. So let's say it was 15 minutes on the clock, and let's say you started with a push-up and then an inverted row. Let's say you start with, say, 8 repetitions. You're gonna perform 8 push-ups, 8 inverted rows. And essentially what you're gonna do is you're gonna go back and forth until you get so fatigued that you can't perform those 8 reps, and you might need to break it down to, say, 5. But you keep going until the time stops. And the overall goal is, even if you're getting to the 14th minute and only performing 1 rep and 1 rep, the goal is to be able to amass the total amount of work. How many push-ups did you do over 15 minutes? How many inverted rows did you perform over 15 minutes? And then our goal is to gamify that and essentially be able to beat that total work each week. So between each week, we're progressively overloading that. So I found that this method was very good to be able to go in phase 1, because A, I'm increasing an athlete's work capacity, and through that total amount of work, we're increasing that athlete's neural efficiency. So with those primal movement patterns, with our push, pull in the vertical and horizontal planes, with our squat, with our hinge, with our lunge, with our twist, all of these basic patterns, we're able to really increase the work capacity in a balanced fashion and be able to increase the athlete's ability to perform those movements. So not only that, obviously with the total amount of work, you're stimulating hypertrophy, you're building muscle, you're doing all those things. Then from there, what we can then do is we can progress to a little bit more of a simplistic form where, again, we're manipulating volume and time to be able to achieve and to be able to progressively overload. So we're gonna perform time sets, max sets, and circuit sets. Now, time sets are gonna be, for instance, we're taking a particular movement, we're setting the clock, and you're gonna perform as many repetitions as you can for, let's say, as an example, 2 minutes. So let's say it's a push-up for 2 minutes. Week 1, you perform as many reps as you possibly can within those 2 minutes. And then essentially next week, when you have to perform it again, you're gonna be able, our goal is to be able to achieve more repetitions within that 2 minutes. And that's how we try to progress it each week as we go. Now, the reason why these are essentially on the next phase in a progression is because by going with an agonist and antagonist, what I notice is an athlete is able to get more overall work in that first phase, whereas with they're faced with one specific movement all out, they can fatigue rather quickly. And so that's why this is a progression to the EDT training we did in the first phase. Now moving on, they're gonna have your basic max repetition sets. Now taking the same idea as the push-up, let's say you have push-up, 1 to 3 sets, max repetitions. They're gonna go as much as they possibly can until essentially they fatigue and fail. and then they're gonna record that number, and our goal is to be able to achieve more each week. So again, we're still increasing the total amount of work. And then finally is gonna be our circuit sets. Now these could be within timed or set amount of rounds, where essentially, let's say they have 3 to 5 movements, again, balancing out, and they're gonna perform anywhere from 3 to 5 rounds of those 3 to 5 movements, and they're going to essentially try to perform them in the least amount of time as possible. So let's say they were able to get 3 movements, set standard reps on each 3 movements. Let's say they have 3 rounds and it takes them 9 minutes or whatever it might be. The goal for the next week is to be able to achieve a lower time. So we're getting better at it. Now, all of this is really to be able to develop that work capacity, increase that neuroefficiency, all those things we discussed. And then the real protocol that's really gonna push together and be able to achieve that stimulus we're looking for that's gonna translate over to the field and court is using bodyweight complex training. Now, complex and contrast are usually intertwined, and that actual word can be used, but essentially what we're trying to do is we're performing a resistance movement, right? To be able to heighten the nervous system, be able to excite and essentially achieve PAP, and then transfer that over to a very similar motion, but performing it in a very dynamic fashion. So for instance, let's say we were performing a back squat, and then we wait a little bit, and essentially we perform a box jump, where essentially what we're trying to do is have an acutely more enhanced response that's gonna give us a bigger box jump, right? So there's gonna be 2 different variations that we're gonna perform with the complex training. The first one is gonna be our iso complexes. And this is essentially where the athlete's gonna perform an isometric motion, and they're gonna specifically be holding that specific joint angle. And then from there, what they're gonna do is after they've held that for a lot of time, not only at that moment did we increase muscle activation, but we also were able to increase rate coding of essentially how fast those motor units were turned on, and as well as being able to increase tendon stiffness if we do it long enough. And then we're able to transfer that over to a more dynamic motion that's mimicking the same muscles that you just fired up with that isometric motion. From there, in the next phase after that, we're able to use tempo with that movement. So let's say we were performing that same push-up, and I was taking a 3 to 5 second eccentric on the way down, very slow, controlled, maybe a 2-second isometric at the bottom, and then a controlled concentric. Now, by slowing down that motion, we're having to recruit a lot more muscle, a lot more motor units to be able to turn on and get fired up. Then after we achieve that and perform that resisted motion, we can then transfer it over to something a little bit more dynamic, like let's say a plyo push-up. That's working very similar motion, but now in a more explosive dynamic fashion. So these are the 3 main categories that you can follow in that progressive fashion to be able to really get overall more explosive, stronger, and really develop that relative force that's going to transfer over to the field or court for athletes. So there you have it for bodyweight training. Try those out. If you're interested in a full program that literally lays out all of this to reps, sets, and times that are best achieved to be able to get those results, check out the program, Athletic Calisthenics. It's one of my best selling down below. I'll catch you guys next time.